Welcome to NTD News. I'm Kevin Hogan. Here are today's top stories. President Biden directing states to make all adults eligible for the vaccine by May. How will the government prepare for such a large increase? Mexico's president says Biden's policies on immigration are helping cartels grow. And a counterterrorism expert doubles down on urging the U.S. to label cartels terrorist organizations. A member of the National Guard is found dead on Thursday. He was stationed in Washington to protect the Capitol. We'll share the latest on the controversial mission. The New York Assembly starts an impeachment investigation against Governor Andrew Cuomo. We'll hear reactions from a growing list of Democrat lawmakers calling on the governor to resign. And a letter demands documents and information from Amazon over the platform's alleged censorship. Written by two GOP congressmen, it accuses the tech giant of canceling conservative views. All American adults will be eligible for the vaccine by May 1st. President Biden announced the news yesterday during his first primetime address to the nation. President Biden is directing states to make all adults eligible for the vaccine by May 1st.
Let me be clear. That doesn't mean everyone's going to have that shot immediately, but it means you'll be able to get in line beginning May 1. Every adult will be eligible to get their shot.
Thursday's announcement is Biden's first primetime address to the nation. It marked a year since the WHO announced the pandemic. Biden urges everyone to get the vaccine.
I need you to get vaccinated when it's your turn and when you can find an opportunity. And to help your family, your friends, your neighbors get vaccinated as well.
This week, Biden directed the government to order more doses. It'll deliver vaccines to hundreds of more community health centers and double the number of participating pharmacies. Biden says they'll organize tools by May 1st to make it easier to get the vaccine. That includes a website, tech teams to help states with their websites, and a phone hotline. This week, a health official said over 90 million Americans have received at least one dose, and over 30 million are fully vaccinated. The CDC says vaccinated grandparents can now visit and hug their grandchildren without wearing a mask in most cases. And in another first, Japan says its prime minister will come to the U.S. to meet with President Biden next month. They'll discuss Indo-Pacific issues. It'll be Biden's first face-to-face meeting with a foreign leader. Mexico's president says Biden's asylum policies are helping enrich cartels involved in human trafficking. And we hear from an expert about what he calls highly militarized cartels that are just over the border in Mexico.
Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador is worried Biden's asylum policies are encouraging illegal immigration, and he says the policies are boosting the human trafficking business along the southern border. Jason Jones, who is a former captain in the Department of Public Security of Texas, spoke with a host of American thought leaders about the issue. Jones says the cartels are highly militarized, and to them, people are a commodity.
When you get to our Mexico's northern border, our southern border, before you cross into the U.S., you have to pay the plaza boss. Determines the amount of money you're charged.
He says he has seen the cartels as far as 30 miles into the U.S., and he says they have members who work shifts like law enforcement and even use deceptive tactics for smuggling operations.
Or what they will do is they will cause a diversion. So they'll send, let's say, 50 to 100 folks directly. Now they shoot drugs on both sides of them.
Jones has called on the federal government to list the crime groups as foreign terrorist organizations. That's as illegal border crossings have been increasing steadily since October. The number of encounters at the southwest border between October and January was about 300,000. That's nearly double the amount from the same time period last year.
One of the National Guardsmen stationed at the Capitol passed away Thursday. Military officials say the man died of a medical emergency.
A member of the National Guard was found dead in his hotel Thursday. He was part of the force protecting the U.S. Capitol. Officials say he was off duty when he suffered a medical emergency. Officials are contacting the man's family before releasing his name. They say his death is being investigated. The incident comes as the Defense Secretary extends military duties at the Capitol by 2 months. The extension is controversial. Republican and some Democrat leaders say the troops aren't needed at the Capitol anymore. Bipartisan leaders of the House Armed Services Committee issued a joint statement Thursday. It says, "We are deeply troubled by the current level of security around the United States Capitol." They add, "It's time for us to review what level of security is required so they can return home to their families and communities." Republican leaders have been vocal about ending the military presence at the Capitol. Mitch McConnell compares it to a war zone. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the troops will remain, quote, "as long as they are needed." The man's death also comes in the wake of complaints that troops were being served inadequate meals. A whistleblower leaked photos to the press showing raw meat and metal shavings in some of the food served to the troops. Military officials say 50 service members were treated for gastrointestinal issues. 2,300 service members will remain at the Capitol until mid-May. Then their mission will be reevaluated.
A State Department spokesman previewed what could come up in upcoming U.S. and China talks. Officials from both countries are set to meet in Alaska next week in their first face-to-face meeting since the Biden inauguration.
There will be some difficult conversations, I would expect. We will certainly not pull any punches in discussing our areas of disagreement. But as Secretary Blinken has said, our relationship with Beijing is a multifaceted one.
Price also denounced Beijing's latest actions toward Hong Kong, saying changes pushed on Thursday effectively removed what remained of the city's democratic elections. Price says the relationship between the U.S. and China is competitive and adversarial, but points out it can also be collaborative. He also says the White House aims to build on the peace accomplishments between Israel and the Middle East, inherited from the Trump administration. He also floated the possibility of Iran rejoining the scrapped nuclear deal. 2 GOP congressmen blame Amazon for boosting cancel culture and censoring conservative views. They're now asking the tech giant to hand over data about the alleged offenses.
In a letter to Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos, Congressman Jim Jordan and Ken Buck said Amazon plays a leading role in silencing conservatives. They requested documents and information from the company about its censoring activities. Jordan is the top Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, while Buck is the top Republican on the House Judiciary Subcommittee on Antitrust. In the letter, they listed several of Amazon's alleged editorial decisions. Choices, they say, give the appearance of a coordinated effort to cancel conservative speech on the company's platforms. In one instance, Amazon refused to allow advertising for a book that was critical of transgender ideology. In another, Amazon's Kindle ebook platform refused to publish a booklet challenging certain views on the effectiveness of pandemic-driven lockdowns. The tech company also permanently banned then-President Trump from its video streaming service, Twitch, and later deplatformed Twitter competitor Parler, a platform popular with conservatives. Jordan and Buck are asking the company to produce documents on 7 alleged cases of censorship against conservative viewpoints by March 25th.
Senator Rick Scott is set to meet with former President Donald Trump at his private club in Palm Beach, Florida. The upcoming meeting comes amid growing tensions between the former president and the GOP's political committees over fundraising. Scott was an early endorser for Trump's bid for president in 2015. He was also the only member of Senate Republican leadership to vote in favor of challenging the 2020 election results over fraud claims. Scott now heads the National Republican Senatorial Committee, or NRSC. In an interview with the Miami Herald, Scott said he hopes to use the meeting to reinforce the need for Trump to work with the NRSC as Republicans look to win back their Senate majority. The New York State Assembly Speaker begins an impeachment investigation against Governor Andrew Cuomo. Cuomo continues to maintain his innocence as growing numbers of his own party say he should resign.
The impeachment investigation against Governor Cuomo has opened, and members of the governor's own party line up against him. More than 55 Democratic New York legislators say he should resign, but Cuomo says he hasn't done anything wrong and he won't quit. Assemblywoman Patricia Fahey says she was waiting for findings from an investigation, but she changed her mind after the latest allegations.
I think he should step aside while the investigation continues.
She says the latest allegations go beyond harassment.
This one is a new level, this issue of groping. It can lead to other charges.
New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio calls the allegations against Cuomo disgusting.
He can no longer serve as governor. It's as simple as that.
The lawyer for one of Cuomo's alleged victims says the victims' statements validate each other, and they show a troubling pattern in Cuomo's behavior.
Neither this latest victim nor Charlotte were responsible for the governor's phones, and yet he got them in a situation, asked for assistance with the phones, and used that as an opportunity to isolate them and to sexually harass them.
She says Cuomo knows sexual harassment is extremely damaging to women in the workplace. He signed some of the most protective sexual harassment laws in the country.
He says he didn't know he was making women uncomfortable. It's not the obligation of women who are subordinate employees, 40 years his junior, to say, Governor, you're making me uncomfortable. It is his responsibility to follow the law.
Katz says it's disturbing the governor continues to justify his behavior. She claims Cuomo likely mistreated other women and says she expects more of them will come forward publicly.
A New York district attorney plans on leaving office later this year. He's leading a high-profile investigation into former President Donald Trump, but says the job is tougher than he thought it would be. Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance told The New Yorker that he will not seek re-election and plans to retire on December 31st. Vance said he made the decision before taking on the Trump case. The 66-year-old cited the pressure of being the Manhattan District Attorney, saying that there's nothing worse than a politician who doesn't know when to leave. Vance is conducting a secretive probe of Trump. Vance's office was able to obtain Trump's tax returns last month. In a statement, the former president said the city has been looking at almost every transaction he's ever done. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says gun reform is critical and Democrats won't stop until they get the job done. NTD speaks to a gun advocate who's pushing back.
Opponents of the new gun control legislation push back against the argument that stricter gun laws will lead to less violence and crime. Economist and gun rights advocate John Lott says, on the contrary, access to firearms can help people protect themselves and their families, especially in a climate of defunding police officers and increased crime. He says these extended background checks could increase the timeline of getting a gun, but that won't necessarily lower crime.
I mean, basically what they want to do with this law is to make it so that the government can delay completing a background check for 20 business days. So when you include weekends in there, you're talking about almost a month of time that they could delay.
Lott says if the goal is to encourage background checks, law-abiding citizens shouldn't have to bear the entire burden.
You want to encourage people to go and do the background checks. You don't want to penalize them. Why make them have to pay $125 in D.C. Or even $55 in some places?
He says in D.C., each gun requires a background check. So if one person is approved to own a gun, they'd have to pay for a background check each time they want to purchase a new firearm. He notes stricter background checks meant millions of people have been denied gun ownership in error. Some law-abiding citizens were turned down for having a name similar to someone else with a criminal history. Lott says these mistakes actually hurt minority communities.
It's one thing to stop a felon from buying a gun. It's another thing to stop somebody simply because they have a name similar to a felon from buying a gun. And the thing is, people tend to have names similar to others in their racial groups.
He says a solution would be to push government background checks to follow the same standards as private company background checks, which he says have fewer mistakes. Lott says if the filibuster remains, he doesn't think the bill will pass in the Senate. Terry Wu and Christina Kim, NTD News.
Former President Trump's Political Action Committee raised over $3 million in just 10 days following his CPAC speech. That's according to Trump advisor Jason Miller. During his speech, Trump called on supporters to donate to his campaign website and his Save America PAC. Trump said it'll help them elect America First Republican conservatives to make America great again. Miller told Steve Bannon's War Room Wednesday their team is analyzing next year's races and candidates. They want to make sure the people Trump endorses aligned with his America First agenda. Trump has already formally endorsed 11 candidates since leaving office. One of them is a former aide who's running against a House Republican who voted to impeach Trump. 11 states want the Supreme Court to review a Trump-era federal immigration policy known as the Public Charge Rule. The coalition, led by Arizona Attorney General Mark Brnovich, filed a motion in court after the Biden administration asked the Supreme Court to drop the case.
The public charge rule requires non-citizens to financially support themselves in order to become lawful U.S. citizens or get green cards. The Trump administration interpreted the term public charge more broadly. His version includes non-citizens who receive government benefits like Medicaid or food stamps for more than 12 months over a 3-year period. In a tweet, Brnovich argues the public charge rule helps ensure scarce government assistance programs are not stretched even further. His lawsuit also states that the invalidation of the public charge rule will cost the states over $1 billion annually. The Biden administration ordered a review of the public charge rule in February, but requested the case to be dismissed on March 9th. In an apparent phase-out, head of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas said his department stopped implementing the 2019 rule. In a statement, Brnovich called the dismissal a strategic surrender by the Biden administration. If the motion is granted, the states can petition the Supreme Court to review the case once more.
And coming up, a church school is asking students to stop calling their parents mom and dad. But some say removing the terms might have negative effects on children. That and more on NTD News. A New York City Christian school is distributing a new 12-page guide about inclusive language. It aims to ban what they consider hateful words. NTD's Arian Pastar has the story.
The Grace Church School here in Manhattan is asking students to stop referring to their parents as mom and dad. Rather, they should call them grown-ups, folks, or guardians. It's an attempt to make everyone feel included. Now their new 12-page guide on inclusive language also makes clear on how to talk about sexual orientation, gender, and race. The school already recognizes language that promotes racism, homophobia, and other forms of discrimination. Those are addressed in their school handbooks, but they want to do more to ban what they consider hateful language. But one expert says doing so might have a problematic outcome in the future.
We need children growing up believing that their involvement in their future children's life is critical, and also understanding that their parents' involvement in their life now is important.
The school aims to make children who don't have parents in their lives feel more included, which is one of the reasons why they released the new guidelines. But changing the terms mom and dad might not accomplish that goal.
They, of all children, understand that it matters to have a mom and dad, and having people at their school telling them that it doesn't matter, that they shouldn't feel bad about them, is not going to be helpful.
The Grace Church School isn't the only one adopting inclusive language. Over in the UK, the University of Manchester released a similar guide on inclusive language. Words like man and woman aren't appropriate anymore for university material. Rather, they should be called individuals. Now, their guide also includes terms describing age. You shouldn't call someone an elderly person or a youngster anymore. Arian Pastar, NTD News, New York.
If you live in Florida and you've been fined for breaking virus-related restrictions, here's some good news for you. You probably don't have to pay the fines. NTD's Allison Lee has more virus-related updates in Florida.
Many Florida residents and businesses punished by CCP virus restrictions won't have to pay their fines anymore. That's because Governor Ron DeSantis canceled those fines with an executive order on Wednesday. It applies to all fines imposed by local governments from March 1st last year to March 10th this year. But it doesn't cancel out fines imposed by the state.
Well, I just think that those fines are out of control, and we want to make sure that folks are protected. Most of those restrictions have not been effective. That's just the reality. The evidence is in on that, and so we want to really go forward fresh, and we want people to make decisions, but we don't want it under the heavy hand of government.
The governor is also celebrating the state's high vaccination rates among seniors and says people aged 60 to 64 will be eligible next Monday. He also emphasizes there won't be any vaccine mandates.
Franklin, 67%. Okaloosa, 66%. I mean, these are really, really good numbers. And we're not going to have 100% interest in it. There's some that don't want the vaccine, and that's totally fine. There's not going to be any mandates on vaccine.
DeSantis says around 3 million seniors have already been vaccinated in Florida. Meanwhile, Senator Rick Scott from Florida is urging states to send the, quote, wasteful $1.9 trillion relief package back to Congress. Scott says if they reject excessive federal funding, local governments can send a message to Washington that, quote, politicians in Congress should quit recklessly spending other people's money. Reporting by Allison Lee, NTD News.
Amtrak is set to restore some long-distance rail service. On its website, the company cited increased demand and congressional funding, saying it will bring back 12 long-distance routes for daily service. Amtrak says it's part of the company's pandemic recovery efforts following schedule cuts last year. The partial service restoration comes ahead of the summer travel season. Amtrak also said it plans to call back more than 1,200 furloughed employees because of relief funding. A historic restaurant in San Francisco is auctioning its contents after closing for good last year. Here's more from NTD's Eileen Eng.
The Cliff House is a San Francisco landmark restaurant overlooking the Pacific Ocean. For 157 years, it served Californian cuisine to locals and tourists. At the end of 2020, it closed for good after the restaurant's lease with the government was up, and its contents are being auctioned off. Kitchen equipment, tableware, furnishings, furniture, decor are all up for grabs over a 3-day online auction. The auction includes over 200 vintage autographed movie star photos.
They are all from mostly the 30s and 40s, so Clark Gable, Cary Grant, Bette Davis, Judy Garland, people like that. And most of them say "to the Cliff House" or "best regard to the Cliff House." So they're very unique, signed autograph pieces for people that ate here during the years when they filmed movies.
Its proprietors, Dan and Mary Huntalis, ran the restaurant for 47 years. The National Park Service acquired the property in 1977. However, in 2018, the government agency decided not to renew the lease. The proprietors had negotiated over the lease, but struggles during the pandemic made it harder for them.
The proprietors were history collectors, and so they not only ran a business, but they also were interested in history and keeping that history. So on the walls, this was not just a restaurant, this was also a museum of sorts for the area.
A group called Save the Cliff House Collection is fundraising to buy items at the auction in hopes to preserve the historic collection. They would all go to a museum.
This place means so much to so many people, and we're heartbroken that it had to end this way and that the pandemic ended up shutting down another part of San Francisco's history.
I actually ate here just before they remodeled it in 2004, so it's great to see how fresh they made it, and hopefully it can continue to be a restaurant after the sale.
They don't know what the government intends to do with the building afterwards. NTD reached out to the National Park Service for a response, but didn't hear back in time for broadcasting. Eileen Eng, NTD News, California.
Coming up, Hong Kong is losing its autonomy to the Chinese Communist Party even more. This as the party plans to reform Hong Kong's electoral system. And in response to the situation in Hong Kong, Facebook says it will drop a cable project that connects Hong Kong with California. That and more on NTD News.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times? I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Hong Kong is moving a step closer into the grip of the Chinese Communist Party. This comes after the party decided to reform Hong Kong's electoral system. More on that from NTD's Don Ma.
2,900 votes for and 0 against measures to reform Hong Kong's electoral system. China's National People's Congress is now accused of being a rubber stamp parliament. That's after it passed a motion with 0 objections. The new election measures make sure the city's officials are vetted, Beijing-approved patriots, meaning those loyal to the CCP. Some say the measure may also lead to the removal of political opposition from Hong Kong's government. The changes further strengthen Beijing's grip on Hong Kong, following the sweeping national security law on the city passed last year. Some critics have even said democracy in Hong Kong is over. Former Hong Kong politician Ted Hui says the city is now a glorified detention center.
Hong Kong is a large detention center now. Now all those who speak up will be suppressed, will be thrown to jail. So we bear
He explained that now the only way Hong Kong can escape its current situation is with international support.
With the new legislation allowing Beijing to do political vetting on candidates. So it's basically a total elimination of political participations by any Democrats or dissidents. So it's hard to take it to the streets anymore because with the national security law, the police would only arrest people and send them to jail very easily. And it can be unwise to take that risk. So now we've only got left with international lobbying. That's what I'm trying so hard to work on.
Beijing often labels other countries' involvement in Hong Kong as interference in its internal affairs, but Mr. Hui sees it differently.
I think any issues on human rights and on crackdowns on protests and for police brutality, these issues are universal issues because it involves universal values. So any nations, any citizens in the world has the standing to speak up against these.
Hui fled Hong Kong amid Beijing's crackdown. He's been granted a travel exception by the Australian government to visit the country. It's part of a global tour to garner support for firmer action against the Chinese regime. Reporting by Don Ma, NTD News.
Facebook is dropping a project that would connect Hong Kong to California. The tech giant says it's because of security concerns. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more on the story.
And another blow is dealt to Hong Kong. Facebook says it's stopping the construction of a special undersea internet cable that would connect California with Hong Kong. Speaking to French media AFP, the tech giant cited security concerns in the announcement, centered around China's growing control over the city. The project was designed to connect the U.S., Hong Kong, Taiwan, and the Philippines. Facebook got the license for the initial connection between California and Hong Kong in 2018. But Washington has opposed the project, also voicing concern over potential risks related to China. The Justice Department proposed a change to the project last June, suggesting the cable could bypass Hong Kong instead, because equipment there could expose U.S. web traffic to Beijing. Some Taiwanese tech companies are found to have recruited semiconductors experts for the Chinese regime. Taiwanese prosecutors launched an investigation into 19 Taiwanese individuals. These individuals are involved in poaching Taiwanese experts for Chinese companies. Some of the individuals were paid an unusually high salary by Chinese companies in Taiwan. The Chinese companies asked them to recruit their former co-workers. In the past 3 years, hundreds of Taiwanese semiconductor professionals were successfully recruited into working for Chinese companies. That's according to the prosecutors. The prosecutors also say the efforts seriously undermine the development of Taiwan's semiconductor industry. The 19 individuals are accused of violating a law in Taiwan. The law requires Chinese businesses to acquire official approval before doing business in Taiwan. Taiwan previously banned Chinese firms from building semiconductor companies in Taiwan. A top CCP official is admitting that China faces a serious unemployment problem. During an annual CCP meeting, Chinese regime Premier Li Keqiang says unemployment prospects are still grim this year. He says 200 million people are in what he calls flexible employment. That's almost 1 in every 7 Chinese people. The CCP invented the term flexible employment. It usually refers to temporary, part-time, or short-term jobs. It may sound like freelancing at first, but in reality, most Chinese people in flexible employment have a relatively low income. It's also hard for them to find a stable job, especially during the pandemic. But because the regime counts flexible employment as employment, these people are likely not included in unemployment statistics. Lee also points out the working age population will increase by 14 million this year. That includes 9 million college graduates. And this is a record high. Nearly 300 million migrant workers will also need jobs.
And just ahead, manufacturing interruptions could spell danger for the tech industry. One of the highest sectors at risk, cell phone makers. And Netflix is testing a new system to crack down on password sharing. It aims to make sure everyone who uses the same Netflix account password lives in the same household. Find out more in just a minute. Just when you thought life was starting to return to normal, reports of production delays in key industries could forecast further difficulties ahead. And this time, it might not just hit your pocketbook, but the device in your hand too. Here's our latest financial and business news on jobs and the economy.
The global chip shortage could be spreading from cars to smartphones. Reuters sources say Qualcomm is struggling to meet demand for semiconductors used in handsets and other gadgets. Key client Samsung reportedly can't get enough chips from the US manufacturer. Demand for Qualcomm processors has soared in recent months. That as Android phone makers battle to win over customers abandoning Huawei, which is beset by US sanctions. But Qualcomm has reportedly struggled to meet demand, itself facing a shortage of some components. One source at a Samsung supplier said the silicon drought was now hitting output of low and mid-range phones. Another said Qualcomm's flagship chips were also running short, potentially hitting high-end handsets. One source at a major contract manufacturer for several brands said it would have to cut output later in the year. A spokesman for the US chipmaker would only reiterate the company's comments earlier in the week, pledging to hit sales targets. The chip shortage first showed up in the car industry. Many major automakers have been forced to halt or slow production due to a lack of semiconductors. The shortage has prompted panic buying of chips, further squeezing supply and prices.
The new stimulus bill comes with some tax benefits, so how can you take advantage of them? NTD's Colin Fredrickson reports.
The motion is adopted.
4 tax benefits have just been passed in the recent stimulus bill. 3 of them involve increasing tax credits.
Credits subtract the taxable income dollar for dollar. So say we have $10,000 in credits and you have $5,000 in tax bills associated. $10,000 in credit would wipe out the $5,000 taxes due and also provide a $5,000 refund.
For the earned income tax credit, childless workers get 3 times more, from $530 to $1,500. The 65 age limit is eliminated, and childless workers can claim the credit at age 19 instead of 25.
The earned income tax credit is basically, set at levels for keeping jobs and employment open, right? And so as employers and as employees, you're earning tax credits for actually working.
For the child care tax credit, families get 50% of their expenses for kids under 13. $4,000 when there's 1 child, and $8,000 for more. Previously, it was 25 to 30%, with maximums of $3,000 and $6,000. The child tax credit has now risen from $2,000 to $3,000 for children under 18, and $3,600 for every child under 6. And the employment benefits, which are normally taxed, are tax-free for your first $10,200 if you made less than $150,000. Many taxpayers face a big problem. They don't know whether they should file their next tax return.
The credits are really taking place in 2021, and the stimulus and the unemployment are taking place in 2020. So the more concern right now is the focus is on what should I do to get my stimulus? Should I file an early tax return so I can get it and maybe get the prior one that I missed?
Experts recommend sitting down with professional preparers and consulting with CPAs to get a good opinion.
People really have to strategically think about their stimulus packages and stimulus refunds and how to best file their returns.
The IRS hasn't clarified if it will extend the filing deadline. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Ikea's famous catalog is getting a new look. It's now been transformed from print to digital in the form of a 4-hour podcast. Ikea announced last year it would discontinue its bulky print catalog, which it's been sending out for 70 years. The Swedish retailer is touting the new audio version as handy and hands-free. It's also billed as something soothing for homebound people to listen to. Ikea's online sales got a big boost during the pandemic as people turned their homes into makeshift schools and offices. Sales surged 45%. Enough to convince Ikea to shift towards online browsing and shopping with its first mobile app. The new Ikea audio catalog is available for free on YouTube, Spotify, and audiobooks.com. If you share your Netflix account with other people, listen up. The streaming giant is testing a new feature that could crack down on password sharing.
Netflix is testing a new feature to clamp down on password sharing. The world's largest streaming service said on Thursday a small number of users will be asked to verify if they share a household with the account holder. It does this by asking for details sent via text message or email, sent directly to the owner. Viewers may delay the verification and keep watching Netflix, but the message may reappear when they return, and they could eventually be required to open a new account to continue streaming. One Netflix spokesperson said this will ensure that people using a certain account have the permission to do so. Netflix's terms of service say users of an account must live in the same household. However, it and other streaming services have declined to broadly crack down on password sharing. Netflix has more than 200 million subscribers globally. It's unclear for now if there are plans for the feature to be implemented more widely.
Coming up, some European countries are suspending the Astrazeneca vaccine pending an investigation. The move follows reports that some patients developed blood clots after being inoculated. And an orchestra conductor becomes a food delivery man in an effort to survive during the pandemic. But he keeps his musical skills polished between shifts. That and more on NTD News. Danish health officials suspended the use of the vaccine produced by Anglo-Swedish firm Astrazeneca after several cases of blood clots, including one death, prompting suspensions in 2 other European countries.
Health authorities in Denmark, Norway, and Iceland suspended the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine shots on Thursday, following reports of the formation of blood clots in some people who had received the vaccine. The announcement comes after Austria stopped using a batch of AstraZeneca shots while investigating a death from coagulation disorders and an illness from a pulmonary embolism. Still, the EU's medicine regulator said the vaccine's benefits outweighed the risks and could continue to be administered. Denmark suspended the AstraZeneca shots for 2 weeks after a 60-year-old woman who was given a shot from the same batch used in Austria formed a blood clot and died. Denmark said the suspension was also prompted by reports, quote, of possible serious side effects from other European countries. Some health experts said there was little evidence to suggest the AstraZeneca vaccine should not be administered. One expert told Reuters it's extremely difficult to distinguish a causal effect from a coincidence. AstraZeneca told Reuters in a written statement that the safety of its vaccine had been extensively studied in human trials, and peer-reviewed data confirmed it was generally well tolerated. The drug maker said this week there had been, quote, no confirmed serious adverse events associated with the vaccine. It also said it was in contact with Austrian authorities about the death and would fully support their investigation.
The European Central Bank is ramping up bond buying in a bid to keep the region's economy on track for recovery. But some economists say there will be consequences. Our France correspondent David Vivez has the story.
Concerned that a rise in bond yields could derail recovery across the 19 countries that share the euro, the European Central Bank, or ECB, says it will use its €1.8 trillion pandemic recovery plan more generously over the coming months. In a press conference, ECB President Christine Lagarde says a new wave of the pandemic has slowed growth in the Eurozone.
There remains uncertainty surrounding the near-term economic outlook, relating in particular to the dynamics of the pandemic and the speed of vaccination campaigns.
The situation seems to mirror the Biden administration's $1.9 trillion relief plan. But one economist and editorial director for a French outlet says there's a difference.
Europe is not going as far as the helicopter money bill signed by U.S. President Biden, but we might soon get there.
Helicopter money refers to an increase in supply of money that is directly given to the public as cash. Wappler says the money drop could cause inflation.
Biden policy is clearly inflation. ECB policy can also lead to it, but it is targeted, as the ECB funds some businesses through the banks by purchasing bonds, financial assets, etc. One thing is certain, there's no such thing as free money, and this kind of measure has barely showed positive outcomes in history.
The ECB estimates inflation to rise from the 0.3% in 2020 to an average 1.5% in 2021. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
A new report in the UK cautions against police officers taking a knee at demonstrations. The report, ordered by the UK's Home Secretary, looks into the conduct of police officers during protests. Here's NTD's Jane Worrell with the details.
Police should think very carefully before taking the knee. That's one conclusion from a wider report about how police manage protests. The Independent Police Inspectorate recommends police to look at the impact of certain disruptive protests. The review was ordered by Home Secretary Priti Patel last September. It followed large-scale protests last year. Thousands of activists took part in Black Lives Matter demonstrations across the UK, partly sparked by the death of George Floyd, a black man who died in police custody in the US. The Inspectorate said some officers felt pressured to take the knee. It concludes with saying police officers taking the knee will rarely be appropriate. It found forces took different stances. One officer faced sustained abuse by activists until he took the knee. National guidance says police should make the decision based on the circumstance and potential security issues. While the majority of protests were peaceful, a small portion of activists were violent or caused disruption. The report finds police often don't find a balance between protecting the rights of protesters and preventing excessive disruption to residents and businesses. In response to the report, Alana Byrne from climate change protest group Extinction Rebellion said, "We don't plan on stopping any time soon. They can try to make it a crime to care, but they will not stop people from caring." The Inspectorate backs the use of live facial recognition to identify certain protesters not following the law. The 157-page report says that while police are usually good at managing protests, a modest reset is needed. It recommends small changes in the law as long as those changes are in line with human rights laws. Jane Worrell, NTD News, London.
Pandemic restrictions are a headache for opera performances, especially the social distancing rules. But an English opera house has found a special way to manage it.
Glyndebourne is an opera house in the idyllic Sussex countryside in southern England. Its managers are planning the 2021 Summer Festival, hoping to stage Wagner's La Traviata. To follow social distancing rules, they decided to move the orchestra to the rear half of the stage and let the cast use the front half with the chorus off stage.
And I think that will actually give the audience a different and actually a fantastic experience. So we're actually quite excited about that.
The annual Glyndebourne Festival was founded in 1934. It's now a world-class music event and a quintessentially English experience. During 90-minute intervals, the audience fan out into the grounds to picnic on the grass and enjoy the views. Last year the festival was cancelled. Hopwood expects this year they might lose £11 million.
It is about people, it's about keeping our staff employed, it's about providing work for freelancers, and it's about engaging with our audiences, continuing to engage with them.
The Opera House has 1,200 seats. The festival is always sold out, but for now only 600 seats per performance, or 50% capacity, will go on sale to allow for social distancing.
That people are booking tickets now because they're desperate to be here, and they're saying to us, we recognise we might not be able to come, but we have to hope and have optimism and have something to look forward to.
The Opera House had to draw on its reserves. She says one of the positive things is that they didn't have to make a single member of staff redundant.
Musicians everywhere are struggling to find work during the pandemic. In a familiar story, one Singaporean conductor has turned to food delivery to get by, but he hasn't given up his passion for music.
For years, Singaporean Chia Amos lived in Russia, pursuing his dream as an aspiring classical conductor. But when the pandemic hit, his usual gigs dried up. Chia says he's applied for more than 40 jobs since last January, with no luck.
Many performing venues around the world are still closed, and hence many of us musicians are still out of a job. We are sort of displaced.
After 10 months without work, he returned to his home in Singapore and started delivering food on his bike. Chia has been spending 10 to 12 hours a day, nearly 7 days a week, delivering food. The salary is about the same as when he was a conductor, but he works almost 4 times the hours.
Yeah, I miss being on stage. Of course, I miss collaborating with people. I miss waving my hands and making magic music.
Still, he is able to find meaning in his new job.
We bring food to people. We bring sustenance to people. And as a conductor, we work with orchestras to bring sustenance to the soul and the mind.
And he reflects on this past year.
And I think this experience sort of hardens me, and I'm able to express my emotions better. I feel like I've matured a few years, even though it has only been a year.
Chia listens to his favorite symphonic orchestra pieces while he rides his bike. And in between shifts, he spends his time studying music and calling his wife back in Russia. He still remains committed to his ultimate dream, which is to become a regular conductor for the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg, one of Russia's top orchestras.
And still to come, a unique video of a bowling alley goes viral. The video producers talk about why the video is a success. Find out more when we return. A video of a bowling alley might not seem that special, but this one went viral on the internet. That's because it was a one shot on a drone.
A drone has taken viewers into a place that some may not dare visit right now, a bowling alley. The nearly minute-and-a-half-long video titled Right Up Our Alley was filmed in just one shot, no cuts or edits to the original footage. Director of Photography with Raleigh Studios, Jay Christensen, explains how it was shot earlier this month in Minneapolis.
It's a Cinewhoop, and so it's literally just a quad that it's pretty small and able to fit through small spaces. And the transmitter is this camera down here, and it just goes right to the goggles. And then the GoPro is what's getting your cinematic video at the end of the day. And obviously there's no audio you can get from it because it's a buzzing drone, so everything for sound has always got to be in post, no matter what, unfortunately.
The studio said it took 10 to 12 attempts over a couple hours before they had the perfect one take. Their patience paid off. The video footage of people hanging out, bowling, and succeeding at it has gone viral on the internet. Director Anthony Jaska.
It's more of a scene than a story, right? It's not exactly, it's painting the picture of kind of getting back out with the friends and a night at a bowling alley, which I think we all really miss. Yeah, it just paints this picture of coming back to normal. We got to remember these places like Bryant Lake Bowling.
The filmmakers say they wanted to fly into the bowling alley to remind people that such businesses are in need of support.
This is bowling.
Headaches plague almost everyone from time to time. From dull, throbbing dehydration headaches to incapacitating migraines, a sore head can wreak havoc on your day. So let's learn more about how to eliminate them.
Welcome to Strong Mind and Body. I'm Gina Marie. COVID-19 can cause them, as can sitting at desks for too long and not getting out of the house enough. When headaches strike, many people's reaction is to reach for a painkiller, and of course these can do the job. But a better solution is to probe the reasons behind the pain, especially if you get similar types of headaches often. Even though they all entail pain, where the pain is coming from is a clue as to what type of headache we could be experiencing. Pain in the face and forehead are markers of sinus-related headache, while the sensation of a pneumatic drill somewhere in the cranium is often migraine. But ultimately, all headaches are caused by the widening of blood vessels near the brain. This stretches sensory receptors in the vessel wall, and we feel that sensation as pain. The cause of our headaches can sometimes come from our bodies or our behavior. Frequent migraine sufferers ultimately understand this and often religiously track their food intake, their activities, and the weather in order to work out what triggers them. But the normal headache sufferer may be less in tune with the causes of their pain. We are all aware of their occurrence at times of emotional stress, but they can equally be caused by the stress we put on our bodies, with bad posture, for example, or recovery from injury. Also, taking too many things on, rushing around trying to get things done, and trying to be all things to all people are common behavioral markers that will predict a tension headache. It's important to listen to the pain. If you have a pain in your leg, it might stop you from playing in that tennis match or turning up for football. You know that if you play on it, you might do more damage and your recovery will take longer. But we don't tend to do that with a headache. We take a painkiller or an anti-inflammatory and carry on as normal, even though our pain receptors are screaming at us that something is wrong. The headache may also be related to the eyes. Look into binocular vision dysfunction. If you are experiencing dizziness, headaches, anxiety, neck pain, or reading difficulties, it may be your eyes. Another could be the sinuses. If so, you're just going to have to wait for them to clear, so taking a painkiller or a decongestant may be a good approach. Another could be dehydration. With your body made of more than 70% water, it's important to stay hydrated. So what else can we do? One way is to lean on the brain's natural painkiller system and to boost neurochemicals associated with happiness. Having a laugh at a comedy, enjoying a good friend's company will all boost these hormones to various degrees. So next time you have a headache for which the causes aren't glaringly obvious, take a look at your life and see what you could change there. The pain, after all, may be trying to tell you something. Thanks for watching.
And that's all for now. Catch us again tonight at 6:30 Eastern. In New York City, I'm Kevin Hogan.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.